At the same time, the Democratic Alliance says it's seeking legal opinion to ascertain whether Police Commissioner General Fannie Masemola misled Scopa during his previous briefings on Eskom corruption. Follows a contradictory letter from Brigadier Jaap Burger, who's tasked with dealing with organized crime threats impacting Eskom and energy security in Mpumalanga. For more on that conversation, we're joined now by MP Benedicta van Minnen. Benedicta, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time and coming on tonight here on In Focus. Why do you believe the National Police Commissioner misled Parliament?
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for that question. Well, the point is that at our meeting in June, where Brigadier Burger was supposed to appear, we were told by the National Police Commissioner, and I quote, that they couldn't find him. At that meeting in particular, we pointed out that we were able to find him on Facebook, incidentally, very, very quickly, in a matter of about 2 minutes. But their excuses that they didn't know where he was really reflected very badly on the police. Subsequently, and over the last couple of days, Brigadier Burger was supposed to appear today in front of Scopa. Instead, he wrote a letter to the Speaker of Parliament in which he laid out his reasons for not wishing to appear. And he pointed out that he had in fact raised these concerns with the police commissioner back in June, on the 4th of June in fact. This was 3 days before the Scopa meeting on the 7th of June. So the police commissioner was very well aware of the reasons why Brigadier Burger didn't wish to appear. He had in fact met with Brigadier Burger. He had no issue at all in finding Brigadier Burger. So for him to then tell Scopa that he didn't know where he was and that they couldn't find him is, should we say, less than forthcoming about the actual facts of the matter.
Yeah. Would you say that kind of answer, because of a public platform and the public nature of the inquiry, would have been consistent with the handling of a national security matter that necessitates, I suppose, protecting the personal safety of the investigator?
Well, the fact is that if he had been straightforward with Scopa and explained why Brigadier Burger did not wish to appear, that certainly wouldn't have threatened Brigadier Burger's security or safety in any way at all. And in fact, it also would have been transparent with Scopa, which is a committee of Parliament, as to the reasons for the non-appearance. Now, it's incredibly important that people are transparent and open with parliamentary committees. The fact that this appears to have been a deliberate concealment of the true facts is something that is very, very worrying. And in fact, if true, triggers a whole number of issues under the Powers and Privileges Act, which can in fact result in criminal proceedings against the police commissioner if it is true. Now that is a very, very serious thing to do. It is not for somebody to give evidence that is possibly let's call them alternative facts, to a parliamentary committee rather than the true facts. That is very problematic indeed. So what do you make of, in fact, is a lot of what we've seen with this investigation.
What do you make of the matters that Brigadier Burger himself is raising, saying, well, you're actually not the committee that should specifically be responsible for oversight on a national security matter like Eskom?
Well, I mean, firstly, whether or not it's a national security matter is something that is open to debate, because this is something that is of national importance. It is incredibly important to the entire country as to what is going on at Eskom. This, and I really would remind you, is an entity where we have seen the former group CEO have his car bugged, being potentially poisoned, where power station managers have had to walk around in bulletproof vests, where there have been a number of threats. It is something that is incredibly serious. It needs to be investigated. There are rumors of high-ranking politicians being involved. Yeah. This is something that is pertinent to every single South African and to the national economy. And the fact that we're seeing this muddying of waters when it comes to trying to investigate the matter is problematic. The DA brought a motion wanting to establish an ad hoc parliamentary committee to investigate this, which in fact is what should have happened. That was turned down by the ANC, and instead what we've had to do is use Scopa to investigate what we can. And quite frankly, what we're seeing coming out of this is incredibly dubious, incredibly murky, and should concern every single South African, because quite frankly, it's not just a case of smelling a rat, but it's a case of smelling a whole number of rats. And we're all affected by this.
Yeah. So the Brigadier arguing that, well, investigations of this nature that affect national security-related criminal activities are classified and should be closed to the public, which is the opposite of what you're saying. So it actually should be open to the public. He says it should be closed to the public and political scrutiny until they are presented in court.
Well, quite honestly, this default towards trying to close meetings goes against the very ethos of our national constitution. There are mechanisms that can be used by parliamentary committees to close meetings or sections of meetings if necessary, but that would need to be debated and to understand whether it is necessary. And bear in mind also that we're talking about a situation where people are unwilling to give evidence at a parliamentary committee in Parliament at a national key point, supposedly protected by SAPs themselves. Now, this really opens all kinds of avenues of debate as to what is really going on, as to why people are not trusting the very organizations that they are either a part of or who are mandated to protect people. So I think what we really should be concerned about is what is actually going on and the bigger picture, rather than bickering about whether or not people have a right to not appear when in fact properly asked to do so by a parliamentary committee.
Yeah.
And in fact, this threatens our entire democracy.
So what is to be done then with this letter, which says to the Speaker of Parliament that, well, look, I informed Commissioner Masemola after he informed me that my presence is required at Scopa. And following that notification, then I told him and expressed my reservations around attending this meeting, which you say clearly points to the fact that when the National Police Commissioner appeared before you, he already knew why Brigadier Jaap Burger would not be attending.
If Brigadier Burger's version is true, it certainly points to the fact that the police commissioner knew what the true facts were. Now, what's happened is that Scopa has referred this to parliamentary legal for a legal opinion on, firstly, what we can do regarding Brigadier Burger, whether or not his reasons for not wishing to appear in front of Scopa, which are technical reasons to do with this mandate, are accurate or not, what our options are, whether or not we can summons him, and also what has been referred, and this is really important, is whether or not, in parliamentary legal's viewpoint, the police commissioner is potentially infringing various requirements in legislation to do with Parliamentary Privilege and Immunities Act. So that is where we are. In the DA, what we're going to do is pursue this very vigorously, because it's very important that we firstly, in fact, use our parliamentary committees properly so that people are accountable, organizations and entities are accountable there too. And secondly, to ensure that South Africans are able to understand the true state of affairs and to be able to really ask questions as to why we're seeing this huge concealment of what is actually happening at Eskom.
The other matter, of course, that has emerged and that we were speaking to just moments ago is the question of Andre de Ruyter being clearly found by the SIU to have approved an investigation outside of the scope of what Eskom would have approved in his own personal capacity. The board did not approve it, and wanting to hold Andre de Ruyter responsible for maladministration, saying this is clearly a governing issue. Now, the Democratic Alliance, I think it was Caleb Kachalia who called Andre de Ruyter brave in his actions. At some point, I think the DA said they would be applying for the PIRE Act to get access to this report. That is now being said by SIU would have been obtained in a manner that is not proper.
Well, it certainly appears that it was not commissioned by Eskom or the Eskom board, but I think the fact that the group CEO appears to have found it necessary to have used George Fivers and his organization to investigate issues around Eskom is something that, again, really, really should raise red flags. Because what it does is, again, it calls into question the security and the integrity of the law enforcement services who, in fact, should be doing this. I would also remind you that the current board of Eskom, the chair of Eskom, in fact, in June, at a meeting with Eskom, with Scopa, pointed out that he really had no interest at all in these allegations, as it wasn't his problem because it was SAPS's problem, which is rather a particularly strange view to take for someone who is the head of the board. It is, of course, also public knowledge that the chair of the board has his own issues with Eskom to do potentially with the church that he's involved with. So I think the fact that this sort of off the beaten track investigation happened is indicative of the fact that there is this incredible lack of trust in the state entities who should be pursuing this kind of issue. Indeed, the SIU did point out that there is potentially an issue in terms of governance, and the SIU will take that up because the SIU is the one organization who, in fact, over the last few years has been pursuing what is happening at Eskom. So I think we really do need to see the bigger picture, not simply shoot the messenger, but also understand why it happened. And I would also remind you that there have, in fact, been a number of allegations that the minister himself, Mr. Gordhan, in fact, did at one point intimate to the group CEO that he needed to get the information any way that he could. So I certainly think that what we're seeing here is a huge can of worms, and I think we need to be very, very rigorous in actually trying to uncover it.
Much appreciated. That's dear Member of Parliament, Benedicta van Minnen.